The first knock sounded like a branch in the wind, but the second one sounded like a person who had already run out of prayers. Elias Mercer sat alone at his kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee and 2 tin plates set before him, though only one man lived in that house, and had for 12 years. The other plate sat across from him out of habit, polished clean, waiting for a woman who would never come back. Outside, the wind dragged red dust across the porch boards and pushed it through the cracks in the door, whispering through the cabin like something old trying to get in. Elias did not move at first. Folks who came after dark usually brought debt, lies, or trouble with a badge pinned to it. He had made his peace with all three by keeping his door shut. Then the knock came again, softer this time. Not weaker, just closer to giving up. His hand went to the rifle beside the chair, not because he wanted to use it, but because a man alone learned to answer the world carefully. He crossed the room without lighting the second lamp. The cabin smelled of old pine, stove ash, saddle leather, and the lavender Clara used to hang in bunches above the window before the fever took her voice and then took everything else. Elias lifted the latch. The door opened 6 inches. A woman stood on the other side, framed by dust and moonlight. Apache, young, but not soft. Her black hair had come loose from its tie, and streaks of red earth marked her face like the road had tried to claim her. One hand pressed against her side, not dramatically, not begging, just holding herself together the way proud people do when pain is the last thing they still own. Her eyes found his and stayed there. Dark eyes, tired eyes, eyes that expected the door to close. "I have nowhere left to go," she whispered. The wind moved between them, carrying the smell of sage, sweat, and far-off rain that had not yet reached the valley. Elias looked past her into the dark. No lanterns, no wagon, no friendly rider waiting at the gate. Only the long, empty sweep of red willow land, 30 miles from town and twice as far from Mercy. Then he looked back into the house behind him, at the cold stove, the empty chair, the second plate, and the small cradle under a gray sheet in the far corner where he never let his eyes rest for long. His voice came out rough, as if it had been buried and dug up in a hurry. "Funny," he said. "I have an empty house." The woman blinked once, like she had not expected kindness to sound so tired. Elias opened the door wider and stepped aside. She crossed the threshold slowly, careful not to touch him, careful not to trust the room too quickly. Her boots left faint dust prints on the floorboards. Elias noticed she carried a small blue-beaded pouch tied tight in her fist, the kind of thing a person held when everything else had already been taken. He shut the door and slid the bolt. For one quiet breath, the house had 2 living souls inside it again. Then a sharp crack snapped through the night, and a bullet buried itself in the porch post outside, shaking dust from the rafters. The Apache woman did not scream. Elias did not speak. He only looked at the splintered wood beside the door, where moonlight caught a tiny mark carved into the spent lead. 1 letter. C. And Elias Mercer knew, before the riders appeared, that Silas Crowder had found her. Elias pulled the woman away from the door without grabbing her, only lifting one hand to show where he wanted her to stand. She understood. Pain had slowed her, but it had not dulled her. She moved beside the stove and lowered herself into the chair Clara had once used for sewing, her fingers still locked around that blue-beaded pouch. Outside, the wind went quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that never meant peace. Elias took the lamp from the table and turned the flame low until the cabin became a room of shadows and amber edges. He did not ask her name yet. Names made strangers harder to abandon, and Elias Mercer had spent 12 years learning how to abandon the whole world before it could ask anything of him. He crossed to the wall near the fireplace, where an old medicine shelf sat under a layer of dust. His hand stopped on a brown bottle with a cracked label. Crowder and Company Fever Tonic. He stared at it longer than he meant to. The woman saw. "You know that mark," she said. Her voice was low, careful, not accusing. Elias set the bottle down as if it had turned hot in his hand. "Everybody in Red Willow knows Crowder." She looked toward the door, toward the porch post where the bullet had struck. "Then you know he sends warnings before he sends men." Elias said nothing. He moved to the window and lifted the edge of the curtain with 2 fingers. Far off, maybe half a mile down the dry wash, 3 lanterns rocked in the dark. Riders. Not close enough to see faces. Close enough to know they were coming. The woman took one slow breath and tried to rise. I should not have come here. Elias let the curtain fall. You already did. She looked at him then, and something almost like anger crossed her face. Not anger at him. At the shape of the world. I will not bring them to your dead. The words landed hard. Elias turned. In the far corner, under the gray sheet, the little cradle waited like an old sin nobody had confessed. The woman's eyes had found it. She had seen the second plate too. The lavender. The clean chair. The kind of emptiness a house could not hide. Elias's jaw tightened. You do not know my dead. No, she said. But I know a house that keeps speaking after everyone is gone. That should have made him tell her to leave. It should have made his voice go cold. Instead, it made the room smaller. Elias took a clean cloth from a drawer and laid it on the table, along with a bowl of water and a roll of bandage. He kept his hands flat, visible. You are hurt. She looked at the cloth, then at him. I can tend it. Then tend it. He turned his back and faced the window, giving her the only privacy the room could offer. Behind him, fabric shifted. Water moved in the bowl. Her breath caught once, but she made no sound after that. Outside, the lanterns disappeared behind the cottonwoods. Elias knew that meant the riders had left the wash and taken the fence line. They knew his land. Or Crowder had paid someone who did. My name is Iona Nantan, she said behind him. He did not turn. Elias Mercer. I did not steal his horse. Did not ask. You will. Elias looked at the old tonic bottle on the shelf again, and for a moment the past came back with the smell of fever, wet cloth, and Clara whispering that Samuel had finally stopped crying. His hand closed around the curtain until his knuckles paled. Iona's voice softened. Crowder sold medicine to my people. Bad medicine. My father kept proof. Elias turned then. The blue-beaded pouch lay open on the table. Inside it was a folded paper marked with the same black crow stamped on the old bottle that had sat in his house for 12 years. And under that mark, in faded ink, was a date Elias had never forgotten. The date on the paper sat in Elias's mind like a nail driven into old wood. October 17th, 1871. The day Clara's fever broke the wrong way. The day Samuel stopped reaching for water. The day Silas Crowder had stood on Elias's porch with his hat against his chest and told him some sorrows were the Lord's business. Elias looked from the paper to the bottle on the shelf, then to Iona, who sat straight despite the strain in her face. Where did you get this? He asked. From my father. Her fingers touched the edge of the blue-beaded pouch, not clutching now, just resting there, as if it were the last doorway to a home already burned behind her. Taza Nantan was a healer. He traded herbs, blankets, and silverwork at Crowder's post. He knew medicine, real medicine. He knew when a bottle carried more promise than cure. Elias heard the riders outside before she finished speaking. Hooves in the distance, then gone, then nearer again, circling the house like coyotes without hunger enough to come in. Iona heard them too, but her eyes stayed on him. My father counted the sick. Apache families first, then Mexican laborers, then 2 white children from a wagon camp east of town. He wrote names because names make lies harder to carry. Elias swallowed. And Crowder found out. Iona nodded once. He smiled at my father in the morning. By sunset, he told the town my father had stolen from him. By nightfall, my father was gone, and I was the thief who ran. She said it without tears, and somehow that made the words heavier. Elias wanted to disbelieve her. It would have been easier. Easier to call her desperate. Easier to say grief makes people see patterns in dust. Easier to keep Silas Crowder where the town had placed him, behind a polished counter, beneath framed certificates, with clean hands and a church pew waiting every Sunday. But the black crow stamped on that paper was the same crow stamped on the bottle. Same ink. Same flourish in the wing. Same lie dressed respectable. Why come to me? Elias asked. Iona looked toward the window, where the lantern light moved between fence rails. I did not. The answer struck him odd. You knocked on my door. I followed the creek north. I lost the trail in the dark. Your house was the only light. Elias almost laughed, but there was no humor left in him. 12 years keeping people away, and the first soul to need his door had found it by accident. Outside, a voice rose through the wind. Mercer, open up. Silas Crowder did not shout. Men like him rarely needed to. His voice had the smooth patience of a banker, a preacher, and a snake all wearing the same coat. Elias stepped toward the door. Iona stood too quickly and braced herself on the chair. Do not give him the pouch. I have not decided what I am giving anybody. Her face hardened. Then decide before he decides for you. The words cut clean because they were true. Elias looked at the cradle in the corner. He looked at Clara's plate. He looked at the old tonic bottle, still waiting on the shelf like a witness too afraid to speak. Then he took the folded paper from the pouch and slid it inside the family Bible beneath Clara's dried lavender. He returned the empty-looking pouch to Ayanna and pointed toward the narrow pantry behind the stove. There is a root cellar under those boards. I will not hide like guilt. Then hide like proof. For the first time, something in her expression shifted, not trust, not yet, but recognition. She crossed to the pantry just as another knock struck the door, firm enough to rattle the latch. Elias waited until the floorboards settled back into place. Then he opened the door to Silas Crowder and 3 riders standing under the moon, their hats low, their smiles already practiced. Silas Crowder stood on the porch as if the boards belonged to him, his coat buttoned neat, his gray hat dry beneath the overhang, his smile warm enough to fool a church picnic and cold enough to keep a man cautious. Behind him waited 3 riders, spread wide in the yard with lanterns held low, their horses shifting in the dust. Elias could smell tobacco, wet leather, and the faint sour trace of fear dressed up as authority. "Evening, Mercer," Silas said. "Sorry to trouble a grieving man at this hour." Elias kept one hand on the door and the other hanging loose at his side. "You are not sorry." Silas let the smile stretch. "No, but it sounds better." The riders chuckled softly. Elias did not. Inside the house, the stove ticked as it cooled. Somewhere beneath the pantry floor, Ayanna Nantan waited in the dark with an empty-looking pouch and a wound she had refused to let own her. Silas leaned slightly, trying to see past Elias into the room. "We are looking for an Apache woman. Dangerous sort. Stole from my trading post, frightened good people, and ran with property that does not belong to her." "A horse?" Elias asked. Silas's eyes flickered, just once. "Among other things." "Funny. I did not hear any horse come through my kitchen." The smile thinned. One of the riders shifted his weight, and his spur made a small silver sound against the porch step. Silas raised a gloved hand to calm him, still looking at Elias like a merchant deciding how low to price a damaged saddle. "You always did have a dry tongue. Clara used to say it was the only thing in this valley that never needed water." The name entered the cabin like smoke. Elias felt it pass over the table, the second plate, the Bible with the folded paper hidden beneath lavender. His face did not move. That took effort. Silas noticed the effort and enjoyed it. "Shame about her," he said. "And the boy, 12 years is it?" Elias stepped onto the porch and pulled the door nearly closed behind him. "Say what you came to say." Silas looked toward the closed door, then back at Elias. "I came to offer courtesy before the law arrives less courteous. Sheriff Pike will be here by morning. If that woman is inside, hand her over now, and I will tell him you were misled." "By an Apache?" "By a story." Silas's voice hardened under the polish. "They carry stories the way others carry knives. You know how it is. A few tears, a few words about injustice, and suddenly decent men forget where they stand." Elias glanced toward the yard. The lantern light showed hoof prints crossing the fence line. Fresh. 6 riders had come, not 4. 2 were somewhere out in the dark, maybe near the barn, maybe at the back window. Silas had not come asking. He had come measuring the walls. "What did she take?" Elias asked. "I told you." "No. You named a horse because that is easy to sell in town. What did she take that made you ride 30 miles at night?" For the first time, Silas Crowder stopped smiling altogether. The quiet that followed was not empty. It was full of things men chose not to confess. Then Silas reached into his coat and drew out a folded notice, crisp and official-looking, with Sheriff Pike's seal stamped crooked at the bottom. He held it where Elias could read by lantern light. Wanted for theft, fraud, and the killing of Taza Nantan. Elias read the words once. Then again. Taza's name sat there under black ink, turned from father into victim, from victim into accusation. Silas lowered the paper. "Help me, Mercer, and I will help you. There is a reward. Enough to put a proper stone over your family. Enough to stop living like a ghost in a house full of dust." The offer struck the porch and lay there between them like something spoiled. Elias thought of Clara's grave, marked by wood that winter had nearly taken. He thought of Samuel's little horse under the cradle sheet. He thought of the date on the paper and the crow stamped on the bottle. Then, from inside the cabin, the faintest sound touched the floorboards. Not a step, not a word, just the old wood settling over the root cellar. Silas heard it too. His eyes lifted toward the door, bright and hungry. Well now, he whispered. Maybe this empty house is not so empty after all. Elias did not look back at the door. A guilty man would have. A frightened man might have. He kept his eyes on Silas Crowder and let the silence sit until even the horses seemed to feel its weight. Old houses make noise, Elias said. So do old men with something to hide, Silas replied. Elias stepped down from the porch, slow and easy, placing himself between Silas and the door. The lantern light cut across his face, showing the lines grief had carved there and the dust that never seemed to leave a working man no matter how much water he used. You brought a paper with Sheriff Pike's seal, Elias said. Bring the sheriff with it. Silas folded the notice with care, as if manners could make lies holy. Pike trusts my word. That is his trouble. One of the riders near the trough shifted closer to the house, pretending to check his saddle strap. Elias saw him. Silas saw Elias see him. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Silas sighed like a patient man dealing with a stubborn mule. Mercer, I knew your wife. I sold her what I had because she asked for help. Do not let some Apache tale turn old sorrow into foolish blame. The words were soft. That made them uglier. Elias felt them reach for the weak place in him. The place that still wondered whether he had failed Clara by buying too late, praying too little, trusting too much. He could almost hear her cough from that last autumn. He could see Samuel asleep against her shoulder, too quiet for a child. But beneath that memory lay another one now. A black crow stamped on a bottle. A black crow stamped on a paper. A date that matched the day his world emptied out. You should ride, Elias said. Silas looked past him to the shuttered windows. Not without what belongs to me. Nothing in this house belongs to you. The sentence came out plain, but it changed the air. Inside, under the pantry boards, Ayanna heard it. Elias did not know that her hand had closed over the empty blue-beaded pouch, or that in the dark she had begun to understand he had hidden the paper somewhere safer than her fist. Silas stepped closer, lowering his voice. There are people in town who still wonder why a man like you survived when his family did not. People are cruel when given a reason. Do not hand them one. Elias smiled then, not wide, not happy, just enough to show the threat had found no home. Town already took its turn with me. Silas's jaw tightened. The polished man was cracking. By morning, that woman will hang for her father's death. If she is gone, there will be questions. If she is found here, those questions will include you. Elias leaned close enough that only Silas could hear. Then tell Pike to bring better questions than yours. For one long breath, Silas looked ready to push past him. Instead, he backed away, brushing dust from his sleeve though none had settled there. He lifted 2 fingers, and the riders drew toward their horses. The 2 hidden men emerged from the dark near the barn, just as Elias had guessed. 6 riders. 6 witnesses to a lie they had been paid not to question. Silas mounted last. From the saddle, he looked down at Elias with his smile returned, smaller now, sharper. Sunrise changes men's minds, he said. So does truth, Elias answered. The riders turned south, lanterns bobbing away across the pasture until the night swallowed them one by one. Elias waited until the last hoofbeat faded beyond the wash before he opened the door. The cabin felt colder than before. He lifted the pantry boards and held out one hand, not reaching down, just offering. Ayanna climbed up on her own, proud and pale in the lamplight. He will come back, she said. Elias looked at the family Bible on the table, where Clara's dried lavender marked the hidden page. No, he said quietly. First, I am going to town. Elias saddled his bay mare before the eastern sky had turned gray. The wind had settled during the night, leaving the ranch under a skin of red dust so fine it softened the edges of every fence rail, every wheel rut, every old thing that had waited too long to be touched. Ayanna stood in the doorway with Clara's shawl over her shoulders, not because she had asked for warmth, but because Elias had placed it on the chair beside her and looked away. The blue-beaded pouch hung from her wrist, light now, almost useless, yet she held it like a promise that had survived being emptied. You should not go alone, she said. Elias tightened the cinch. If you come, Crowder gets what he wants before I get there. If you go, he may turn the town before you speak. Elias looked toward the south road. 20 miles of hard country lay between his ranch and Red Willow, past dry creek beds, mesquite flats, and the old mission stones where travelers sometimes left prayers nobody came back to read. Then I will have to speak faster than him. Iana studied him in the pale light. Men like Crowder do not fear speech. Elias took the family Bible from his saddlebag and checked the folded paper still hidden between Clara's lavender and the Book of Job. The flowers had gone brittle with age, but when the pages opened, the faint scent rose like a hand from the past. No, he said. They fear proof. He mounted and rode without looking back, because looking back would have shown him the woman standing in his doorway, and that doorway had not held a living soul at sunrise in 12 years. The trail to town was quiet, but quiet in the west was never empty. It carried hoof marks, fence cuts, a torn strip of black cloth caught on a cactus spine, signs of men who had traveled before dawn and wanted the land to forget them. By the time Elias reached Red Willow, the town was awake in the worst way. No hammering from the blacksmith. No children chasing hoops near the schoolhouse. No laughter from the mercantile porch. Just people standing in small knots along the street, whispering under their breath and turning silent when his horse stepped into view. A notice had been nailed to the post outside the sheriff's office. Same wanted paper. Same crooked seal. Same lie made public. Sheriff Amos Pike stood beneath it, hat in hand, his face pale under yesterday's stubble. Elias dismounted. You signed that. Pike would not meet his eyes. I signed what was brought to me. That is not law. That is ink. A few townspeople heard. They shifted closer, hungry for trouble as long as it did not ask courage from them. From across the street, Silas Crowder stepped out of his trading post wearing a clean vest and a mourner's expression. He had beaten Elias to town, just as Iana warned. Mercer, Silas called, loud enough for windows to open. I was hoping grief had not clouded your judgment. Elias took the Bible from his saddlebag. Silas saw it, and for one small second, his face forgot its manners. Then a boy pushed through the crowd, no more than 10, Apache, breathing hard as if he had run across half the valley. He stopped beside Elias and pointed back toward the north road. They found her, the boy said in broken English. They took her to the square. Elias looked past him, toward the church bell rope swaying in the morning air. Then the bell rang once, slow and heavy, calling the town to witness something it had already decided to believe. Elias moved toward the square with the Bible under one arm and the Apache boy keeping close to his stirrup, small feet dusty, eyes fixed on the crowd ahead. Red Willow had gathered in a half circle before the church steps, where a wagon bed had been pulled into the open and made into a platform for judgment. Sheriff Pike stood beside it with a paper in his trembling hand. Silas Crowder stood near the front, calm as Sunday morning, while Iana Nanton stood on the wagon boards with her wrists tied in front of her and Clara's shawl missing from her shoulders. She looked tired. She looked pale, but she did not look defeated. That mattered, more than the rope hanging from the church beam, more than the faces staring at her as if her bloodline had already answered every question. Elias felt the town turn as he entered. Boots scuffed dirt. A woman drew her child closer. The blacksmith lowered his eyes. Nobody spoke his name. They only made room, the way folks make room for a storm when it is already too late to shut the windows. Silas smiled first. You are late, Mercer. Elias stopped 20 feet from the wagon. Looks like I am early enough. Sheriff Pike swallowed and lifted the paper. This woman stands accused of theft, fraud, and the death of Taza Nantan. Until proper authority arrives, we are holding a public inquiry. Public, Elias said, looking at the crowd. Inquiry. The two words hung there, plain and ugly. Iana's eyes found his. She did not plead. She did not ask what he had done with the paper. She simply saw the Bible in his hand, and for one breath, the sharpness in her face softened. Silas stepped forward. We have witnesses. Elias looked around. Paid ones. A murmur moved through the people. Silas's smile cooled. Careful. A man with your history should not throw stones at other men's honesty. Elias walked to the wagon and set the Bible down on the edge of the boards. The old leather cover was cracked. Clara's name was written inside, faded from the touch of his thumb over too many winters. My history is exactly why I am here. Pike shifted uneasily. Elias, this is not your matter. Elias turned to him. My wife bought fever tonic from Crowder on October 17th, 1871. My son took the same dose before sundown. Their names are in his paper. The square went still. Even the horses tied outside the saloon seemed to settle into listening. Silas laughed softly. Grief has made a poor witness of you. No, Elias said. Grief made me quiet. There is a difference. He opened the Bible. The scent of dried lavender rose into the dusty air, so small and gentle it seemed almost wrong among so many hard faces. He pulled the folded paper free and held it where everyone could see the black crow stamped at the top. Silas's hand twitched. Just once. But Iona saw it. So did Elias. Taza Nanton wrote names, Elias said. Apache names. Mexican names. White names. Children from a wagon camp. Ranch hands from the South Flats. Clara Mercer. Samuel Mercer. The crowd changed when the names began. Not all at once. Shame never moves fast. It comes like shadow when the sun drops, touching one face, then another, until no one can pretend the day is bright. Silas stepped closer, voice low. Paper can be forged. Elias nodded. That is why I brought the bottle. He reached into his coat and set the old Crowder tonic bottle beside the Bible. Same stamp. Same date scratched into the label by Clara's careful hand. Across the square, an older woman in a faded blue bonnet covered her mouth. Her husband had died that same autumn. Elias looked at her, then back at Silas. Read the names, Sheriff. Pike stared at the paper as if it had grown teeth. His lips moved, but no sound came. Silas's face hardened. This town knows who I am. From the back of the crowd, a woman's voice answered, cracked but clear. So do I. Everyone turned. Martha Crowder stood at the edge of the street in a travel coat stained with dust, holding a ledger against her chest like it weighed more than iron. Martha Crowder did not walk like a woman looking for mercy. She walked like a woman who had carried the truth too long and had finally grown tired of its weight. The crowd opened for her slowly, shame making them clumsy. Silas turned first, and whatever color lived in his face drained down behind his collar. Martha, he said, soft as a warning. She stopped beside Elias and laid the ledger on the wagon bed. Its cover was brown leather, cracked at the corners, tied with a black ribbon that had once been fine. Her hands shook, but her eyes did not. You kept 2 books, she said. One for the taxman. One for God to read when you were gone. A low sound passed through the square, not quite a gasp, not quite a prayer. Sheriff Pike stared at the ledger. Elias watched Silas. Iona watched everyone. She understood now that justice had entered the square in the shape of paper, ink, and one frightened woman who had decided fear was no longer enough reason to stay silent. Silas took one step toward Martha. You are confused. I was married to you 12 years, she answered. Confusion ended long before love did. Elias untied the ribbon and opened the ledger. The pages smelled of dust, lamp oil, and old money. Rows of dates marched down the paper in Silas Crowder's careful hand. Fever tonic diluted. Payment received. Sheriff fee. Burial credit. Tribe account closed. Names followed. So many names. Too many for the square to keep pretending this was only about one Apache woman. Elias turned the book toward Pike. Read. The sheriff's mouth opened. Nothing came. From the wagon bed, Iona spoke, quiet but clear. My father said truth has a voice, but sometimes it must borrow a coward's tongue. Pike flinched as if the words had touched him. Then he took the ledger. His hands were trembling so hard the pages whispered against each other. October 17th, he began, voice thin at first. Crowder and Company fever tonic, for bottles delivered to Mercer Ranch. Payment received. No guarantee requested. Elias closed his eyes for one breath. When he opened them, the town was not the same. The old woman in the blue bonnet was crying without sound. The blacksmith had removed his hat. A young mother held her child tighter, not from fear of Iona now, but from fear of what she had almost helped become. Pike kept reading. Apache names. Mexican names. Settler names. The dead did not sound different when spoken aloud. That was the terrible thing. They all landed in the same dust. Silas's hand moved toward his coat, but Elias stepped between him and the wagon. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just enough. No more warnings, Elias said. Behind the church, on the ridge beyond town, several Apache riders appeared in the morning light. They carried no raised weapons. They made no sound. They simply watched, still as fence posts, while Red Willow heard the truth it had tried to bury. The sight of them took the last strength from the crowd's anger. Silas looked from the riders to Martha, from Martha to Pike, and for the first time that morning, he seemed like a small man inside expensive clothes. "You will believe her?" he asked the town. "After all I built here?" Martha answered before anyone else could. "You built a counter, not a conscience." Sheriff Pike lowered the ledger. His badge caught the light, dull and scratched, looking less like authority than a debt finally come due. He walked to Ayanna and untied the rope from her wrists with fingers that could barely manage the knot. "Miss Nantan," he said, voice breaking around the words, "this town has wronged you." Ayanna rubbed her wrists once, then let her hands fall. She did not thank him. Some things done too late are not gifts. Elias picked up Clara's Bible and the old tonic bottle. Silas stood alone now. The crowd moved back from him as if distance could cleanse them. Then the Apache boy from the road climbed onto the wagon and handed Ayanna Clara's shawl. He must have taken it when the riders found her. She wrapped it around her shoulders, and only then did Elias see how tired she truly was. From the ridge, one Apache elder lifted a hand, not in triumph, not in threat, but in witness. Ayanna looked toward him, then toward Elias. The square held its breath, and Elias understood that the hardest part was still ahead, not proving the truth, living after it. By noon, Silas Crowder was no longer standing in front of the town. He was sitting behind the same barred window where he had sent poorer men for smaller sins, his clean vest dusty, his voice finally of no use to him. Sheriff Pike kept the ledger locked in his desk, not because the town deserved trust, but because the dead deserved record. Red Willow did not cheer. Cheering would have sounded too much like innocence. Folks drifted back to their shops and porches with their heads lowered, stepping around Ayanna Nantan as if she had become a mirror they were not ready to face. The Apache riders came down from the ridge only after the square had emptied. They moved slowly, without triumph. The elder who had raised his hand in witness stopped before Ayanna and touched 2 fingers to the blue-beaded pouch at her wrist. No long speech passed between them. Their language moved softly, like creek water over stone, and Elias did not pretend to understand. He only stood near his mare with Clara's Bible under one arm and the old tonic bottle wrapped in cloth, feeling the strange ache of a man who had finally learned who took his family and still had no one to bring home. Ayanna turned to him before she left the square. Clara's shawl still rested over her shoulders. "Your dead have names again," she said. Elias looked toward the churchyard at the edge of town, where 2 wooden markers leaned under 12 years of sun. "They always did," he answered. "I just stopped saying them out loud." She nodded, as if that was a prayer she understood. The elder and the riders took the north road to bring Taza Nantan home. Ayanna rode with them for 3 miles, then stopped where the trail split by the dry creek. Elias had not followed close. He would not. A person who had been chased did not need another shadow behind her. But when she turned her horse back toward him, he waited. "My people never stopped wanting me," she said. "Then go where you are wanted." The words were kind, and because they were kind, they hurt. Ayanna looked past him toward the long road to his ranch. A house can want a person too. Elias had no answer for that. The ride back to Red Willow Valley was quiet. By late afternoon, the sun had lowered behind the mesquite, turning the dust gold and the fence wire bright as thread. When Elias reached his porch, he expected the old silence to meet him. Instead, he found the door standing open a few inches, moving gently in the wind. Ayanna was inside, not hiding, not waiting like a guest afraid to breathe. She had swept the red dust from the floorboards. She had set Clara's shawl over the chair. On the wall beside the door, she had hung the blue-beaded pouch from a wooden peg. Beneath it, on the small table, Elias saw Samuel's wooden horse. He had not brought it out. He had not even remembered taking it from the cradle that morning. Maybe he had. Maybe grief moves some things before a man can admit his hands are ready. Ayanna stood near the stove, careful with the space, careful with the dead. "I will not stay if my staying wounds this house," she said. Elias looked at the pouch, the toy horse, the second plate still on the kitchen table. The house was not healed. No house heals in a day. But something had shifted. The emptiness had lost its authority. He took the second plate, washed it clean though it already was, and set it back down with a fork beside it. "Supper is thin," he said. "Beans. Coffee. Maybe bread if the flour has not given up." Ayana's mouth softened, almost a smile, but not quite. I have eaten worse. They sat as the last light crossed the floor. No promises were made. No future was named. Outside, the valley settled into evening, and the wind that had once sounded like a warning now moved softly under the eaves. In the corner, the old cradle remained covered, but for the first time in 12 years, Elias did not look away from it. He said their names then, Clara and Samuel, quietly, without breaking. Ayana bowed her head. Out here, mercy did not erase the past. It did not turn sorrow into joy or make strangers forget the roads that brought them. It only opened a door, set one more plate on the table, and let the wounded rest without asking them to explain why they were tired.